I'm excited too. It's finally time to talk about that most versatile, free-spirited, and stylish of all punctuation marks, and my personal favorite, the dash. The first thing you need to know about the dash is that it is not the same as the hyphen. Let's take a look at a few sentences that will illustrate what hyphens are used for. My 3-year-old still has no idea how to use a hyphen. In this case, I've got 3 words that are being combined to make one word. It's basically a compound noun, right? The ex-convict mended his ways. Here, a prefix is being attached to another word, turning it into one word. The company has a state-of-the-art gumball machine. Here you've got 4 words, state-of-the-art, being turned into one adjective. Her name was Melinda Lamb Lupp. The hyphen is joining 2 last names to turn them into one. So you can see from these examples, first of all, the hyphen is very short, especially when compared to that Mac Daddy, the dash. Hyphens are joiners. They bring things together, turn multiple words into essentially one. And rather than indicating a pause, a hyphen is kind of like the opposite of a pause because it brings words together. Now let's look at the dash. We've looked at the punctuation hierarchy a couple of times now. We know that punctuation exists as a system of pauses. We've got long pauses that are strong enough to stop a sentence. We've got short pauses, commas, that work for little mid-sentence breaks. And then we've got our medium pauses, the semicolon, the colon, and the dash. The semicolon is fairly neutral. It works like a period, right? But we use it when we want to bring 2 ideas together. The colon is anticipatory. It says, there's more, and here's what it is. The dash is emphatic. We use it when we want to emphasize something. The dash is a long horizontal line. In fact, it's properly called the M dash because it is roughly the width of a capital letter M. And since we're especially thorough, let's point out that there is an N dash, which is roughly the width of a capital letter N. The N dash is that medium length line, which is used to mean through, like pages 34 through 36, May through April. But let's focus on the M dash. Now first, how do you actually make a dash? Well, if you're typing in, say, Microsoft Word, Word will automatically format the dash for you. So just type your sentence. Tap the hyphen twice. And like magic, the dash appears. Thank you, Microsoft Word. On the other hand, if you're typing in Docs, Docs does not auto-format a dash. What's going on here? This is one of the most basic punctuation marks. I don't get it. But what you do is just pretend that you're typing on a typewriter, tap 2 hyphens, we call it good. Now, if you're looking for a little more polish here, what you can do, instead of the little double hyphen tap, is go up here to Insert, Special Characters, search dash, or M dash, and then go over here and make sure you've got the M dash, just click it, and it'll get inserted in. But you know, life is too short to be inserting a bunch of special characters. There's nothing wrong with doing the double hyphen tap. If you've got a number pad, you can type Alt 0151. Now let's look at the dash in practice. Think about how the dash is being used in the following sentence. Each person is born to one possession which outvalues all his others, his last breath. Well, first, you can hear there's a pause there, right? And second, I hope you get that sense of almost forward motion. Here's the first guideline for using dashes. This is quoting from the essay Mad Dash by Ben Yagoda. Dashes are used for 2 main purposes. The first is what I call the pause dash. It more or less says to the reader, right here, I want you to take a breath. What you will read next relates to what you've just read in an interesting way, and I would like to emphasize it. When using dashes this way, you're allowed only 1 per sentence. If you like, you can think of the pause dash as being like a finger point in the sentence that says, there's more here, and I want to emphasize it. Now, if you're saying that sounds a lot like another punctuation mark, you're absolutely right. It sounds a lot like the colon. And in fact, in many cases, you could use a colon and a dash almost interchangeably. So let's take a look at that Mark Twain example again. Each person is born to one possession which outvalues all his others, his last breath. In this case, I could easily take that dash, swap it out for a colon, and my sentence would still make sense. All right, let's look at another example. Words can be like x-rays if you use them properly. They'll go through anything. Again, just like the colon, it's like we've got that finger point in the sentence that says, hey, there's something else coming up here. Let me give it a little emphasis. Here's some examples from John Steinbeck. If a story is not about the hearer, he will not listen. And here I make a rule. A great and lasting story is about everyone or it will not last. The strange and foreign is not interesting, only the deeply personal and familiar. Now, if I were writing this, I would feel perfectly fine with swapping out that first dash for a colon. Second dash, I think it definitely feels a little more dashy. But either way, again, you've got that sense of there's more, let me emphasize it. Now, if you say, when would you choose a colon as opposed to a dash? Remember that the colon tends to be very businesslike, whereas the dash has a little bit of panache. It's got a little energy, a little style, a little flair. Let's look at one more example. But wait, we were supposed to be talking about eating whales. Again, you see in a sentence like this, the dash just works a lot better than a colon might.
Huh?
Now take a look at this sentence. You trust the writer to be telling you the truth, or trying. In turn, as a writer of an email, a letter, a tweet, a book, you hope that your reader will be generous in interpreting your words. You hope you'll be taken seriously when you want to be. You hope to be understood. You'll notice that we have not one dash, but two here, working together in pairs. Here's guideline 2 for using dashes. Again, from Ben Yagoda. The second main category is the parenthetical dash, in which dashes are deployed in pairs and set off non-essential elements of the sentence. When using dashes this way, limit yourself to one pair per sentence. In addition, make sure dashes are placed in such a way that if the material within them is removed, the sentence still makes sense. Wait, placed in such a way that if the material within them is removed, the sentence still makes sense? Sounds an awful lot like pair commas. So punctuation marks that work in pairs, that's parentheses, commas, dashes. You need to think of as scissor snips. Whatever's enclosed between those paired marks, you should be able to snip out of the sentence, and the sentence should still make sense and be grammatically correct. Let's look back at that example by Cecilia Watson. In turn, as a writer of an email, a letter, a tweet, a book, you hope that your reader will be generous in interpreting your words. We can snip at each of those dashes, cross out what's in between, and the sentence reads fine without it. In turn, as a writer, you hope that your reader will be generous in interpreting your words. Again, if you can snip out what's enclosed between those paired marks, then you know you've used them correctly. Let's look at another example. If you have other things in your life, family, friends, good productive day work, these can interact with your writing and the sum will be all the richer. Now, if you take a look at what's enclosed between those paired dashes, you can see that we've got a list with commas in it. Well, it makes sense then to bump up to dashes to enclose that list because it's just a stronger mark and it prevents that bit from kind of getting lost in the sentence. Life does not consist mainly, or even largely, of facts and happenings. It consists mainly of the storm of thoughts that is forever blowing through one's head. Here's a case where we could have gone with different punctuation marks, or rather, Mark Twain could have. We could have used parentheses, could have used commas, but the dashes are emphatic. They're giving a little bit of emphasis to that, or even largely, that's been inserted in the middle of the sentence. So, snip, snip, snip. If you've used the dashes correctly in pairs, your sentence should work fine without it, but use the dashes when you need to emphasize something or when the thing that you're inserting maybe contains commas. Here's guideline 3 for using dashes, again from Ben Yagoda. A third purpose of dashes is to indicate disjointedness. This function shows up in dialogue. I saw Bill yesterday. Wait, is that a helicopter there? Never mind. In prose with a stream of consciousness quality, and in poetry, and is subject to no rules at all. I'm going to add to this guideline 3.5 for using dashes. Use dashes when writing dialogue to indicate someone has been cut off. I think I'm in blah. John slumped to the floor. Let's take an example of disjointed or interruptive dashes in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats couldn't read maps or signs. Now we could look at this pause here and say this is a pause dash, but I think kind of what's going on is he's sort of mentally correcting his thoughts here. And if you're trying to get inside a character's mind and you want to show that they're thinking something and then they switch, no, it's not that, then a dash is a great way to show that mental interruption. Now take a look at this example. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large donut in a bag, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters, that's right, that's what I heard. Yes, their son, Harry. Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Now you can see here that first line, the Potters, that's right, that's what I heard, is being cut off there. And the second line, it's got a dash at the beginning and a dash at the end. So this gives us these little snippets that we're hearing. Not quite the beginning, not quite the end. Again, just little interrupted bits. Overlapping dialogue, if you will. Let's look at a third example. No, thank you, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for lemon drops. As I say, even if you-know-who is gone. My dear Professor, surely a sensible person like yourself can call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense. For 11 years I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name, Voldemort. Now if you take a look at that first dash, the one that's highlighted there in yellow, pretty clearly Professor McGonagall is being cut off. The dash shows the interruption. Now take a look at Dumbledore's line there. All this you-know-who nonsense. For 11 years I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name. We've got that dash there, that pause in the sentence where, is this a self-interruption, disjointedness? Is this a pause dash? Whatever, it's pausing the sentence, right? But take a look at the colon there. That colon could have very easily been a dash. But if the writer had put a dash there, then it would have looked like it was trying to pair with that other dash, and it might have been a little bit confusing. So you've got one use of a dash up top, and then you switch to a colon down below. Again, switching between those punctuation marks just for the sake of clarity in the sentence. And here's an example from Emily Dickinson. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never, in extremity, it asks a crumb of me. Now what effect do the dashes have here at the end of each of those lines and occasionally in the middle? Let's pause and make sure we're on target. We know that the dash is a medium-length pause. We know it can say, there's more, and I want to emphasize it. We know that dashes can work in pairs to insert something into a sentence. We know that they can be used to indicate disjointedness or interruptions. Now let's take a look at the dash in action in a classic book, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Here's our first example. You began the evening well, Charlotte, said Mrs. Bennet with civil self-command to Miss Lucas. You were Mr. Bingley's first choice. Now, how is that dash being used? Okay, wait, you got me, right? That's a hyphen, not a dash. Just checking to see if you're awake. Okay, how about here? Yes, but he seemed to like his second better. Oh, you mean Jane, I suppose, because he danced with her twice. To be sure, that did seem as if he admired her. Indeed, I rather believe he did. I heard something about it, but I hardly know what. Something about Mr. Robinson. Well, in that one sentence, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 dashes. Pretty clearly, this is indicating disjointedness. In this case, it seems to me that Mrs. Bennet wants to admit that Mr. Bingley likes her daughter Jane, but she's trying to sort of interrupt and indicate a little bit of doubt, maybe so as not to come across as bragging. And here's another example. First of all, he asked Miss Lucas. I was so vexed to see him stand up with her. But, however, he did not admire her at all. Indeed, nobody can, you know. And he seemed quite struck with Jane as she was going down to the dance. So he inquired who she was and got introduced and asked her for the 2 next. Then the 2/3 he danced with Miss King, and the 2/4 with Maria Lucas, and the 2/5 with Jane again, and the 2/6 was Lizzie, and the Boulanger. If he had any compassion for me, cried her husband impatiently, he would not have danced half so much. For God's sake, say no more of his partners. Oh, that he had sprained his ankle in the first dance. I think there can't be any doubt here that this is an interruptive dash, where Mr. Bennet cuts off Mrs. Bennet as she continues to wax eloquent about this dance. Finally, let's take a look at this conversation between the fabulous Elizabeth Bennet and her sister Jane. Oh, you are a great deal too apt, you know, to like people in general. You never see a fault in anybody. All the world are good and agreeable in your eyes. I never heard you speak ill of a human being in your life. I would not wish to be hasty in censuring anyone, but I always speak what I think. I know you do, and it is that which makes the wonder, with your good sense, to be so honestly blind to the follies and nonsense of others. Affectation of candor is common enough. One meets with it everywhere. But to be candid without ostentation or design, to take the good of everybody's character and make it still better and say nothing of the bad, belongs to you alone. This first use of the dash, pretty clearly that pause dash, right? I've got something to add here. Let me give it a little emphasis. And then in that second sentence there, we've got two dashes working together in pairs to insert that really, really long bit there in the middle of the sentence. And here's a case, since what we're inserting is so long, those nice strong dashes work well. And if we took them out, we still have a sentence. But to be candid without ostentation or design belongs to you alone. Nicely done, Jane Austen. Let's do just a few exercises. Where would you add a dash here? You don't really want to know what Richard said, or do you? Now we could leave this without any punctuation at all in the middle, but we could add that dash to give a little emphasis to that tail bit. Give this one a try. He told me, you're not going to believe this, that Karen was the woman he met at Easton after the rubber duck incident. So I can use paired dashes to insert something right there in the middle of the sentence. How about this one? Now in this case, I could leave the sentence as is. There wasn't much I liked about Jim except his money. If I really wanted, I could put a little comma after Jim. If I want to emphasize that M bit though, then I can put in a dash. There wasn't much I liked about Jim except his money. And how about here? Well, if this is dialogue and I'm being interrupted, I want to show that with a dash. You must be... He was interrupted by the clatter of silverware dropping out from under her jacket. The dash is one of the most versatile and useful tools in your writerly toolkit. So start paying attention to how other writers use it. Start trying to use it yourself. Learn it. Love it. The end.